When you first decide to take your money off in exchange, there is this really specific moment where you hold a physical hardware wallet in your hand for the first time.
Oh, yeah. It's intimidating.
It really is. It
Ah,
feels like holding a raw live wire. I mean, it's thrilling, sure, but it is deeply terrifying because in a fraction of a second, you are certainly your own bank.
right.
You're your own security guard, your own IT department.
Yeah.
And, in that exact moment, you realize the intense friction that exists between absolute convenience and absolute sovereignty.
Yeah, and it is really the ultimate trade-off in this space. I mean, on one end of the spectrum, you can have a slick zero-friction app that just manages everything for you.
Exactly.
But, in that scenario, you are effectively just asking a corporation for permission to spend your own money.
Yep.
On the other end, you can have a sovereign, fully verifiable, completely air-gapped setup. But that demands serious operational discipline. It demands that you treat self-custody as an active craft, not just some passive hobby.
Well, and that brings us to the stack of disclosures we have from the 2026 Bitcoin conference and the developer back channels this week, because they all point to one really uncomfortable truth.
The industry is basically tearing itself apart, trying to solve that exact friction.
Yes, exactly. So welcome to this week's deep dive. Our mission today is to cut through all that noise and deliver the weekly signal on Bitcoin infrastructure and self-custody.
Because frankly, whether you are currently running a complex multi-sig setup or you are just thinking about moving your very first sats off in exchange, the ground beneath us is shifting rapidly.
Right, and to help you navigate that shift, we need to analyze these weekly developments from two distinct angles.
Yeah, so my focus will be on the raw technical rigor. We really have to look at the infrastructure shifts, the first principles security models, and the actual code enforcing these systems.
Because all the sleek design in the world doesn't matter if the foundation is flawed.
Exactly. A beautiful user interface is entirely worthless if the underlying architecture compromises your keys.
And I'll be looking at this from the user behavior side. So the psychology driving adoption, the educational friction points, and how these tools actually feel in the hands of a normal person.
Which is just as critical.
Right. So let's jump right into the layer where most of us interact with the Bitcoin network daily, which is the software layer.
A lot happening there this week.
Oh, a ton.
Mm-hmm.
We saw the release of ZEUS version 13, and they are attempting to completely rewrite the onboarding playbook with what they call the graduated wallet experience.
Yeah, it is a radical departure from how self-custodial Lightning wallets traditionally operate. I mean, historically, the infrastructure demanded that a user understand routing and liquidity before they ever made a single payment.
Right, and let me challenge that old model for a second, because economic self-custody isn't free.
No, it's not.
If a new user downloads a standard self-custodial Lightning wallet today, they have to pay an on-chain fee to open or lease a channel.
Which can be brutal.
Yeah, even at, say, 6,000 or 7,000 sats, that is a massive psychological barrier for someone who just wants to receive a $5 tip. It completely kills the magic of an instant payment.
It creates a huge wall for adoption.
Exactly. So ZUS version 13 bypasses this by starting new users off as what they call mortals.
I love that naming convention.
Right. And in this mortal phase, you aren't running a Lightning node at all. You are actually using a Cashew eCash implementation. You get a Lightning address immediately, zero channel management, and it just works.
But what really caught my eye in the developer notes was the speed of it all.
Oh, the speed improvement is wild.
Yeah, they rewrote their Cashew implementation from the ground up using the CDK, the Cashew Developer Kit, and fund recovery from a mint dropped from 2 minutes and 50 seconds down to just 7 seconds.
Which is insane. I mean, how does a developer kit strip out almost 2.5 minutes of processing time?
Well, it comes down to the underlying mechanics of Chromium eCash and how the wallet handles blind signatures.
Okay, lay that out for us.
So in a standard setup, when you request tokens from an eCash mint, the server is cryptographically signing your tokens without ever actually seeing the serial numbers.
Right. That is the blind part, which preserves your privacy.
Exactly. But older implementations really struggled with the heavy computational overhead of verifying all those cryptographic proofs, especially when we're storing a backup, right? Because the wallet has to scan the mint's entire history to find your specific blinded tokens.
So the math was just bottlenecking the phone's processor.
Basically, yeah. The CDK optimizes that mathematical scanning process, It allows the local device to verify the blind signatures almost instantly rather than choking on the cryptography.
Wow.
Plus, it introduces an offline mode and ties Mint selection to your Nostr social graph, so you are interacting with federations operated by people you actually trust, rather than just random anonymous servers.
Okay, let's unpack this. Is this graduated approach essentially like giving someone a highly convenient, easy-to-use gift card to get them in the door? But as that gift card gets more and more valuable, the app intentionally nags them until they put those funds into a real cryptographic vault.
What's fascinating here is that this represents a massive shift in how we think about scaling infrastructure, because under the hood, ZEUS doesn't actually let you stay immortal forever.
Right, the UI changes.
Yeah, as your balance grows, the interface visually heats up. It starts actively warning you about the trade-offs of eCash federations and pushes you to become a god.
Meaning you upgrade to true self-custody with a real embedded Lightning node right on your phone.
Exactly. And to make that transition viable, ZEUS actually swapped out their entire node engine this week.
Right, they dropped LND.
They did. They replaced the heavy embedded LND implementation with Spiral's LDK node as the default backend.
Why is LDK better for mobile?
Well, LDK is highly modular and mobile native, which means it has a drastically lighter footprint on the phone's battery and memory. But more importantly, it allows a user to migrate to a new physical device with their channels completely intact.
Oh, that is huge. So you just input your seed phrase on a new phone, and your funds from on-chain Lightning and Cashew all populate instantly.
Yep, without forcing any channel closures.
That eliminates one of the biggest headaches in mobile self-custody.
Yeah.
But, fixing the routing layer is really only half the battle. We also saw a major infrastructure update from Bitcoin Safe this week that targets base layer privacy.
Yeah, this was a massive step forward. They merged compact block filters for all users by default.
And this fundamentally changes the trust model for light wallets,
I mean,
right?
it does. Historically, if you didn't run a full node yourself, your wallet had to ask a central Electrum server for your transaction history.
Which means you are essentially handing over a list of all your addresses to a third party.
Exactly, which is a catastrophic privacy leak.
So, if I'm understanding compact block filters correctly, instead of me handing a central server my exact bank account number and asking for my balance, the server is just handing me a heavily encrypted phone book of everyone's balances. And I take that phone book and check it myself in private.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. The mechanism, which is defined in BIP 158, involves the Bitcoin nodes generating a compressed cryptographic filter of every transaction in a block.
Okay.
Instead of you giving the node your addresses, the node broadcasts these tiny mathematical filters. Your phone downloads the filter and checks locally to see if your specific keys are involved in that block at all.
And if there is a match.
If there is a match, then your phone downloads the full block to get the actual data. The central server never knows who you are or what addresses you control.
So it achieves true peer-to-peer architecture.
Yes, and the initial sync only takes about 30 minutes now. Tools are finally refusing to compromise on sovereignty while acknowledging that true peer-to-peer architecture is the only durable path forward.
Right. But a private, sovereign software stack is completely irrelevant if the private keys signing those transactions are sitting on compromised silicon.
Absolutely.
Which takes us directly into the hardware announcements from the 2026 Bitcoin conference. Because the physical layer is where the real battles are being fought right now. Let's look at Blockstream's new release, the Jade Core.
Oh, this was interesting.
It comes in at a $99 price point, and what strikes me is the aggressive simplicity. There's no camera, no complex biometric extras, just a USB-C and Bluetooth device engineered solely to get coins off exchanges.
And that simplicity at the hardware layer is a strict security feature. Every additional bell and whistle you add is a potential attack vector.
Right.
The Jade Core retains the 100% open source firmware and hardware model of the original Jade Plus. But the crucial mechanism to understand is how it protects the physical secret on the chip using blind oracle PIN protection.
I want to break down that mechanism because the term blind oracle sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
It does sound a bit magical.
So is it like renting a safe deposit box where the bank manager doesn't actually have a key to your box, they just have a stopwatch? Like, they can't see what's inside, but they strictly enforce a rule that says you're only allowed to try your combination once every hour, preventing a thief from just sitting there trying thousands of combinations. Is that the underlying logic?
Precisely. Most traditional hardware wallets store the secret entirely on the device itself, protected by a PIN.
Okay.
If an attacker steals the device, they have physical possession of the secret, and with enough time, they can brute force the PIN. The Jade model, however, splits the secret cryptographically.
How does it split it?
Part of it is derived from your PIN, part is stored on the physical device, and part requires an active signature from a remote blind Oracle server.
Oh.
The server never sees your actual seed phrase or your data. It just acts as a cryptographic rate limiter. If an attacker enters the wrong PIN in too many times, the Oracle server permanently refuses to sign, rendering the stolen physical device mathematically useless.
Wow. And because it is open source, you can run your own Oracle server, right?
You can. Add in the genuine check cryptographic attestation, which basically proves the silicon wasn't swapped out during shipping, and you have an incredibly hostile environment for attackers.
Now, contrast that open source transparency with the update Bitkey rolled out this week, because Bitkey finally added a screen to their hardware device.
Yeah, that was a big pivot.
It really was.
Mm.
Lunaticoin posted a scathing tweet pointing out the irony here. For years, Bitkey pushed a heavy marketing narrative that a screen wasn't necessary, that verifying transaction details on your phone was perfectly secure. Now they suddenly pivot and add one.
Adding a screen is objectively the correct move, to be clear, because blind signing is a catastrophic security flaw.
Go for sure.
You must be able to visually verify the transaction details on an isolated, secure device before you authorize the signature. But, the screen is merely a distraction from the real issue here.
Right, because Wallet Scrutiny published their analysis of the new Bitkey firmware this week.
They did, and their verdict was uncompromising. No source.
No source.
Yeah.
That's damning.
Yeah. The community cannot build or verify the firmware from the provided source code because Bitkey included a closed source dependency in the build process.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If a hardware tool improves its physical convenience by adding a screen, but introduces a closed source software dependency under the hood, doesn't that fundamentally break the golden rule of Bitcoin? Don't trust, verify.
Yes.
I look at this from a psychological perspective, and it feels like we are literally trading our long-term sovereignty for a slick unboxing experience.
I agree with that assessment entirely. If a tool improves convenience at the cost of your ability to independently audit the code, it ceases to be a self-custody tool. It becomes a liability.
You're just trusting a brand at that point.
Exactly. You are blindly trusting a corporation not to include a backdoor or a key exfiltration bug. Reproducible builds, meaning the ability for anyone to compile the code and get the exact same binary hashes as the manufacturer, are absolutely non-negotiable in this space.
It perfectly illustrates the argument Hugo from Nunchuck made in his blog post this week.
That was a great piece.
Yeah, he wrote about how the industry constantly tries to retrofit revolutionary technologies into comfortable legacy concepts. He used the analogy of explaining a car to someone in the 1800s as just a faster horse.
Which completely misses the point of what a car is.
Right. And he argues that hiding the concept of cryptographic keys from users is the exact same mistake. Wallets are not keys. Wallets are made of keys. When we tell users, hey, don't worry about the keys, we handle the crypto stuff, we are treating them like they are incapable of learning.
It is a deeply flawed design philosophy. Abstracting away public key cryptography severely limits a user's future sovereignty.
How so?
Well, whether you are custodying Bitcoin, signing a secure message, or eventually giving an AI agent a digital identity, understanding the functional difference between public and private keys will be the baseline literacy test of the 21st century.
So we shouldn't be shielding users from it.
No, Nunchuck's philosophy is to never hide the keys, which ensures the user is never subjected to vendor lock-in.
But, even if we demand 100% open source transparency and we perfectly understand our keys, we still have to contend with physical reality. Transparency doesn't make silicon invincible.
Unfortunately, no. We have to assume our physical devices will eventually be compromised. And a disclosure from Adam Semeka this week proves exactly why that assumption is mandatory.
This was the really scary part of the conference news.
It was. He detailed an encounter with a closely guarded, real-world testing device utilized by manufacturers. And this device is capable of instantly reading the data inside almost any secure element on the market.
Wait, let me challenge you that for a second.
Yeah?
Because a secure element is essentially a microscopic vault inside the silicon chip, right?
Yes.
And it is explicitly designed to self-destruct and wipe its memory if it detects tampering. How on earth is a testing device bypassing a physical self-destruct mechanism?
Through a process known as fault injection, or power glitching.
Power glitching.
Yeah. There are only a handful of foundries globally that manufacture these highly specialized chips, and they are incredibly secure against standard threats. But if an attacker has physical possession of the chip and specialized hardware, they can introduce microscopic voltage drops glitches at the exact nanosecond the chip is booting up.
Oh, wow.
This localized power starvation causes the chip's security logic to fail. It literally bypasses the memory wipe and allows the attacker to dump the raw memory, extracting the private keys directly from the silicon.
That is terrifying.
Simeka's disclosure shatters the illusion that a single hardware wallet is an impenetrable fortress.
So what does this all mean for a normal user? I mean, if there are literal devices out there that can crack secure elements via voltage glitching, is keeping your entire life savings on a single hardware wallet the digital equivalent of locking your wealth inside a heavy glass safe?
That's a very good way to put it.
Like, it looks incredibly secure to the naked eye, but anyone with the right specialized hammer can just shatter it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it proves that true security is a dynamic process, not a static product. You cannot buy absolute security in a cardboard box.
So what's the solution?
The only mathematical mitigation for a single point of failure is multi-sig. Specifically, a setup that combines entirely different hardware architectures so that a single exploit doesn't compromise the quorum.
Right, because if they have a hammer that breaks glass, you don't want all your vaults made of glass.
Exactly. Simeka recommends a 2 of 3 setup where the devices do not share the same physical attack vectors. For example, your first key is on a secure element wallet, like a cold card.
Okay.
Your second key is on a completely stateless device, like a seed signer.
Explain stateless for a second.
A stateless device holds absolutely no keys in its memory once it is powered off. You have to scan your seed in via QR code every single time you use it.
So if it's sitting in your desk drawer and gets stolen,
There is literally nothing for a fault injection attack to extract. The memory is empty. And then, for your third key, you use a blind oracle device, like the Jade core we talked about earlier.
okay, so a physical breach of one device or even a supply chain attack on one specific manufacturer does not result in a loss of funds.
Correct.
But, I mean, multi-sig has traditionally been an absolute nightmare for everyday users to set up and recover, like keeping track of derivation paths and extended public keys. It's daunting.
It has been, but the protocol layer is adapting rapidly. Wizard Sardine published an extensive technical breakdown this week on how Miniscript is solving this exact friction.
How exactly does Miniscript standardize a complex multi-sig vault? I know it's a game changer, but how does it work under the hood?
Miniscript is essentially a compiler for Bitcoin script. It allows developers to express incredibly complex spending conditions in a standardized, universally analyzable language.
Like what kind of conditions?
Like a 2 of 3 multi-sig vault that has a time-locked recovery key kicking in after a year.
Well, that's incredibly useful.
It is. And Miniscript creates an output descriptor. Instead of you being locked into the specific quirks of the software that created the vault, that descriptor can be imported into any compatible wallet.
So it's like a universal translator for your setup.
Yes. The hardware devices can read the descriptor, understand exactly what the spending conditions are, and verify the change addresses securely. It pulls the entire hardware manufacturing industry into an interoperable standard.
Which is so desperately needed. And speaking of treating self-custody as a serious operational craft, we have to look at the workflow Parman detailed on Twitter this week.
Oh, that was fantastic.
It really was. He outlined an entirely air-gapped multi-sig workflow for buying a Lamborghini. It is highly entertaining, but the psychology behind it is exactly what we were talking about today. He refuses to let his keys touch an internet-connected machine.
It is the ultimate expression of verifiability.
Let me describe his setup because it's wild. He uses 2 standard laptops. He opens an online laptop, which he calls the Parmanadol, connected to his own node. He generates the transaction to buy the car, but this laptop has absolutely no private keys on it.
Right, it's just a watch-only interface.
Exactly. He exports that unsigned transaction as an animated QR code on the screen. Then he boots up a completely offline laptop, the Parm Air Gap, which holds the private keys. He points the offline laptop's webcam at the online laptop to scan the QR code.
A literal air gap.
Right. He signs the transaction in a completely offline environment, generates a new QR code of the signed transaction, and then uses the online laptop's webcam to pull it back and broadcast it to the network. The keys never touch a network card.
And as Parman humorously noted, the dealer sees the payment, delivers the car, and his wife sees the car in the driveway and gets furious.
Yes.
But technically speaking, abandoning specialized hardware entirely for standard air-gapped laptops neutralizes the secure element vulnerabilities we discussed earlier.
It is a brilliant illustration of the extremes of self-custody. So let's pull all of this together and summarize the biggest takeaways for you, the listener, this week. At the software layer, the ecosystem is getting incredibly smart at bridging the gap between convenience and sovereignty.
Right. Tools like ZEUS version 13 and Bitcoin Safe prove that you can have a smooth, fast onboarding experience without sacrificing private sync or falling back on centralized servers.
But the physical hardware layer remains an absolute battleground. You must demand open-source verifiability. Do not trade your long-term sovereignty for a built-in screen if it comes bundled with closed-source dependencies.
Remember Nunchuck's warning. Wallets are abstractions made of keys, they're not the keys themselves. And when it comes to deep security, you must recognize that single signature setups have physical, silicon-level vulnerabilities. A single hardware wallet is a single point of failure.
Which brings us to our core call to action this week.
Yeah.
Collaborative custody and complex multi-sig setups fail when the signers don't know the runbook. You need to run a drill. Set up your vault, verify every single transaction on the physical device itself, and physically test your recovery process from scratch. As the sources noted this week, a key that has never been tested isn't a key. It is a liability waiting to happen.
This raises an important question. We spent today deeply focused on the physical extraction of keys, securing silicon chips, and air-gapped laptops. But at the Bitcoin conference, there was a completely different conversation happening in the background.
Oh, right. The cryptographers panels.
Yes. We saw leading cryptographers like Jonas Nick from Blockstream Research and Adam Back having heavy discussions about post-quantum Bitcoin. Jameson Lopp even announced an upcoming series on quantum attack game theory.
That is a staggering thought to end on. We're obsessing over voltage glitching and secure elements. But if the underlying cryptography of Bitcoin itself eventually requires an upgrade to resist quantum computing, and a mathematical paradigm shift involving entirely new signature schemes, how will our current rigid stack of physical hardware wallets, air-gapped laptops, and metal feed plates adapt to that reality?
It is the ultimate collision of physics and mathematics. We are spending immense energy securing the physical layer today, but we have to ensure that our operational security and our hardware can survive a complete shift in the mathematical foundation tomorrow.
The friction between convenience and absolute sovereignty is never truly solved. It just evolves with the technology. You are your own bank, your own security guard, and your own IT department. Staying sharp is the only way forward. We'll see you next week on The Deep Dive. Keep your nodes running and keep your keys safe.